Good evening, and welcome to our final session of the World Cup Comes to Seattle Speaker Series, being organized by the Global Sport Lab. We've had an incredible journey through so many different topics over the past 10 weeks, and we're really glad that you're here for our final session. My name is Ron Crable. I'm the director of the Global Sport Lab, and we're pleased this evening to be focusing on the Pride Plus match and LGBTQIA plus rights, both here in Seattle during the World Cup and beyond. Tonight, we're operating on slightly different mode than in our past sessions. Since it's finals week, students are focused on the end of their quarter, and our session tonight is entirely online. We'll also split the session into two halves, since one of our guests, Jen Barnes, is joining Mayor Katie Wilson for a press conference immediately following our session, and will need to bow out early. So our first half tonight will focus primarily on local organizing efforts around the Pride Plus match. And then in the second half, we will switch gears to welcome back Mary Harvey to take a look at LGBTQIA plus rights across FIFA and the tournament as a whole. This also means that we'll have two separate opportunities to ask questions using the platform Slido. First, about halfway through to ask questions of Jen, and then again at the end to ask questions of Mary. Thanks once again to our co-sponsors, the School of Interdisciplinary Arts and Sciences at UW-Bothell, which is my academic home, along with the Responsible Business Law Initiative of the Behr Institute at UW School of Law and the Jackson School of International Studies. So let me begin tonight by very briefly introducing each of our speakers. First, we have Jen Barnes, co-chair of the local organizing committee's Pride Plus Match Impact Council and the founder and CEO of Rough and Tumble Pub, which in just a couple years has become an absolute institution in the world of women's sports, and especially soccer here in Seattle. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
And as I said earlier, we are also really privileged to welcome back Mary Harvey, who spoke in an earlier session as well. Mary is the winner of the 1991 World Cup, the inaugural Women's World Cup, and the 1996 Olympics as well, as a goalkeeper for the U.S. women's national team, and is now CEO of the Center for Sport and Human Rights, as well as the author of the United Bid's Human Rights section. Welcome back, Mary. So I want to start tonight actually by showing a quick video that's coming out of the council that Jen co-chairs. Isabel, can you play the video?
Welcome to Seattle.
Welcome to our home.
This is truly one of the most beautiful places on earth. We have incredible restaurants, incredible nature, an incredible community that is so excited to welcome you.
From there's one place you can see a mountaintop, you can see an active volcano, you can see a rainforest, you can see the ocean, you can see the lakes. You can do anything you want in a day, all from the most beautiful, natural place on earth.
Seattle is a place where you can create your own belonging. And for me, that's why I live here. It makes room for you.
You can basically find any bit of what you want to do and any bit of who you are in Seattle.
You can feel proud of who you are in this city.
I just always feel at home in Seattle.
This is the most beautiful state in the country.
You're an urban area next to the sea, tucked up against the mountain. Like, this is Narnia. This place should not exist.
If this is your first time in Seattle, explore everything. Go to the waterfront, take a ride up the Space Needle, check out Mopout, catch a fish, go explore, go get lost, be curious, ask questions. This is how we pride.
I pride by being out in the open.
By creating a safe, welcoming, and open space.
By loving my wife in public, creating spaces for everyone to belong.
How do you pride?
How do you pride?
How do you pride?
How do you pride?
Such great stuff. So Jen, why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit of background to this video? How did the Pride Plus match come to be? How is the Impact Council approaching its work? And any other updates on where things stand with planning for the match and surrounding events?
Sure, I'm happy to. First and foremost, I'm co-chair of the Seattle Pride Match Inclusion Council. It's made up of just an incredible group of sports leaders, queer and allies, as well as business people. And we just pulled together some truly amazing, inspiring people to help advise Seattle World Cup host committee in how to kind of plan for and uplift not just our Pride community here in Seattle, but also the celebrations that we're having on behalf of LGBTQ plus human beings all over the world. And And it's just been a true joy. So many of the people who are on the Pride Match Inclusion Council were seen in some of those videos, and then there's quite a few more. That is just one of many elements of what we did to activate around this match. And it all started. I mean, Mary, you were part of the early submissions to bring the World Cup here. This has been a very long process and something that we're thrilled to have happen. There's the way World Cup works. Once the city is, assigned or awarded the matches, you find out what dates you're getting, but you don't know who the draw is going to be for which teams. So we knew relatively early on, over the last year and a half or so, that we were getting one on Friday, June 26th. And for those of you who aren't familiar, that is historically Pride weekend here in the United States, and it's where we have historically celebrated Pride in Seattle, and it ties back to honoring and celebrating Stonewall. So we knew we had this opportunity. There was kind of really no question from any level at Seattle 26, which is the local organizing committee, the host committee, that we wanted to celebrate Pride. And I think there's a couple of really interesting elements. So we don't have any control over what is in the stadium. We have influence and control of what is outside the stadium. Yet we are integrating with and coordinating with the various countries and FIFA in planning. So we ended up being there. I think I haven't been here for all the classes, but I assume everybody here knows that there are 16 host cities between US, Canada, and Mexico. We have 11 of those in the United States. And of those 11, actually, of the 16, we're the only one that sort of put our stake in the ground to celebrate Pride. And it was something that I think we've never wavered from. And even after we found out who the draw was, because there was potentially risks or concerns, kind of depending on your angle. But on, I think it was December 9th, December 10th, was it December 9th or 10th, Mary? It was one of those 2 days. I can tell you it was the Saturday morning that was the first weekend day that our second location had been open in Columbia City, and we were just packed. And I was watching the cities that we were drawing, or the countries that we were drawing via text, and it was just so exciting. And then we learned that we drew Iran and Egypt, which are two countries that are historically, do not have a strong LGBTQ plus set of laws. And so I think there were some people who thought that we should or may back down from celebrating the Pride Match, and we didn't waver from it, and instead I think have embraced it even more. I think from day one, from my perspective, it has felt like a huge mantle to be celebrating Pride for the world. The World Cup is often called the World Game. Soccer is called the World Game. This is often spoken about as the biggest celebration of sports in the world. And so, I think we take that very seriously. We also wanted to make sure that we were not taking away from anything or any celebrations or any community that were already celebrating Pride. Here, historically, we wanted to actually just elevate and augment, and then create something that was beyond just that one match, which is Friday, June 26th at 8 p.m. here at Seattle Stadium. And so we've really spent the last 18 months developing all kinds of programs and activations. The video series that you just saw at the beginning is just one of, I believe, 13 or 16 videos that we've created with over 50 athletes and spokespeople. And there's a lot of famous faces you'll see there: Megan Rapinoe, Dan Wilson. I can't remember if Ken Griffey Jr. did one or not, but it was just a lot of fun. It was really talking about Pride. But other than that, what we've really done is created opportunities for queer-owned businesses to be highlighted. We created a unity loop where it invites visitors and tourists to actually tour around and go to these places and spend money on small queer-owned businesses and highlighting them. We've created donation programs. We did a huge art contest, and you'll see posters going up around the city, and they're going to be on the columns of the monorail, and those are highlighting our LGBTQ plus artists and community here as well. So it's been a joy and has been extremely well received. And I hope that as we get closer and closer to this very important match and the kickoff for World Cup, that you continue to see some more really exciting things happen.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I'll invite the audience to start posting questions in Slido. Feel totally free to do that. But in the meantime, let me ask a follow-up question. So Jen, what do you hope will be or expect to be the long-term legacy of the Pride Plus match, whether in Seattle or beyond that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. It's something that I think as a council we've turned back to many, many, many times. And the Pride Match and Inclusion Council, or Impact Council, is actually housed within the Legacy group. And so one of the big components that we've worked really hard on is ensuring that whatever we do has long-standing significance and really create some change in a positive way, and not just locally, but actually globally. We've received messages of support from around the world around this, and we know without any question that we're under a really important lens. It's amazing to me when I think about the entire world will be watching that game. There will be people in every country watching the game on June 26th, and there is no way that you won't understand and see that the queer community being loved and embraced and elevated. And I think that those who are lucky enough to come visit this gorgeous city and state that we all live in here will have an even more impactful version of that. I think my biggest wish would be that if somebody is not feeling safe or comfortable to come out, that they know that we are holding space for them. Whether that's locally or globally, if they feel confident and safe enough to come out, that they do, if that feels right to them, and if they don't, that they know that we are celebrating them right here, and that as the world sees that it maybe shifts a little bit. I think that's the biggest, most exciting thing we can hope for, and the United States isn't doing particularly well right now either. And so I hope that for our local US and Washingtonians who are queer, trans, LGBTQIA+, that they all feel a little bit safer and a little bit happier and more whole inside.
Great, thank you. Two questions from the audience, and I'll sort of combine these because they both have to do with sort of questions of collaboration and connection to other organizations. Could you say more? The first one is, could you say more about whether there were conversations in other cities about a Pride match? And if so, do you know how those went? Did anyone reach out to you? And then second, has there been coordination with Sounders and Rain to highlight their upcoming Pride matches after the World Cup is over?
Well, they're great questions. I'm not able to speak to whether other cities did or did not have conversations about whether or not they should. I did not receive those. If somebody at the local organizing committee here did, I haven't heard about it. To my knowledge, that is not the case. We appear at this point to the latest information that I have, which might be a week or so old, is that we are not aware of another city wanting to do this, or at least deciding to, or negating that idea. And then we work very, very closely with the Sounders and the Rain throughout all of this. There are members of the Sounders and the Rain who are actually on the local organizing committee's board. So, I think it would be difficult or challenging to plan anything around soccer in Seattle without incorporating those two wonderful teams.
Great.
So yeah.
Mary, I'm wondering, do you know if other cities have had conversations about having pride matches?
Actually, I don't know that, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
I mean, there are other sort of, LGBT iconic cities that are also hosting,
Yeah.
and it's a shame that those other cities aren't also celebrating Pride. But I have to say, it just makes me even more proud to live in this terrific city.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Here's
Agree.
yeah, agreed. Here's another question from the audience. What, if any, are some safety precautions being taken in case there are any kinds of confrontations in any sort of direction over Pride weekend?
There's a lot of information on the Seattle. I can pull it up. I think it's SCA FWC 26. Excuse me, 26. You can go to the local organizing committee's website, and I believe there's a whole page dedicated to it. We are working very closely with state, national, local security, and we're very tied in on everything. And we've got a lot of security stuff in place, and at this point, everything is looking really good.
Great. So I have a question. Has there been any connection with either queer Muslim organizations or Iranian or Egyptian groups explicitly about organizing around the Pride match? I mean, I think it's one of the things I'm noticing is that everyone sort of talks about it as if Egypt and Iran being named is sort of like oil and water, as opposed to recognizing that there are queer Muslims, there are queer Egyptians, there are queer Iranians. So what happens?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are LGBTQ plus Iranians and Egyptians who live here and who live in those countries and all over the world. I think there's a lot of incredible people in our community who are here for a reason, because we're a safe, welcoming, supportive environment, and for various reasons. I know the LOC has been in close contact with all of the communities, certainly, and I don't know about activations per se.
Gotcha. And what about what are you most excited about in terms of the organizing and the events and the activations around the Pride match? Is there anything that you're really like, wow, this just hit the mark. This is exactly what we were hoping for?
I think it's something that will hit me when I'm at the game on the 26th. But I think one of the things that I love so much is there isn't any singular activation. I mean, what we've done is we've supported all the local nonprofit organizations. We've worked closely with GSBA. We've worked closely with the Pride campaign. We're a sponsor of Trans Pride. We've sponsored a group to go in the parade. We've supported artists. We've been paying artists. We've been supporting small business with activations. The LOC put together. I keep looking over my left side of the screen here because I'll just show everybody these 3 posters. I don't know if you can see them, but on the window there, 1, 2, 3, are the 3 winners of the art competition that we had, and those are going to be displayed in downtown, like I said, on the monorail columns, and another handful of activations. But one of the things that we did with those is create a merch line. And the artists are getting paid $5. I think it is $5 from every single piece sold. And the local organizing committee is a nonprofit organization. FIFA doesn't make anything. The organizing committee doesn't make anything. The cost of the item, the artist, and then the local small business like me is one of the places where you can buy it, Rough and Tumble. We're benefiting from some of this. And that's really how it should be. So I think it's really the thing that I'm most proud of is that there isn't any one single thing, but that we've looked to every neighborhood in the city. We've looked to every small business, the arts community, the nonprofit, the grassroots organizing committees. We've been as broad and as we can around the whole state, and tried to really leave an impact that is lasting and broad and insidious, but in a good way, rather than having just one particular ceremony or moment. There will be, if all goes well, there will be some really cool things that tend to happen really close to that Pride weekend. And so I can't wait to see those happen. So I think that'll be fun. But really for me, it will just be that we have created a beautiful, safe, welcoming, inclusive space for queer people to exist safely, and do so on a global stage is a privilege and an honor and a mantle that we don't usually get. And I'm really excited that it's not limited to just that one day, but actually to really the whole 6 weeks.
Yeah. So one of our audience members mentions, just as an FYI, that Seattle Men's Chorus created a short documentary about their song cycle, Love Beyond Borders, about gay Muslims trying to escape from their homes. So just put that out there for the audience. And then there's another question. Activating local businesses is a big issue in host cities, and Pride is a great catalyst. Are there lessons here for local businesses, immigrant-owned businesses, for example?
I mean, I think we've done a lot, but we've worked. There's also, I'm not sure if everyone's aware here, we're also lucky enough to be having a match on Juneteenth. So we have done, and I had very little involvement in that. It's actually a whole nother council has worked on a lot of Juneteenth celebrations and activations with Black-owned and Brown-owned businesses around not just the state, but the city as well. If anybody's interested, you might really enjoy looking at the See and Win app, and you can either download that as SEA and Win app, and you can look at the Unity Loop. There's all these different maps in there that will encourage local and visitor folks to cycle through and tour businesses and charts about and you get points and opportunities to win jerseys and stuff like that. So it's really encouraging. I think every city has stories of large sporting events coming to town and leaving behind neighborhoods in the process, or not supporting small business. And we have, I think, hopefully done a really thoughtful job and put a lot of effort into ensuring that small business is elevated. I've been involved in the ones that have leaned into the queer community most. As far as lessons learned, I think there's a lot of takeaways that we'll all be able to learn when this is over, and best practices should hopefully be in place for future events that we host here in Seattle.
Fantastic. Can you say a little bit more about the whale flukes? Because I know there was a special fluke designed around Pride. I was at Rough and Tumble a week or so ago, and I saw one of them. But can you share a little bit about how those are being used and how those work?
Sure. So I don't have it handy in front of me, but I think at this point, most people are probably starting to become familiar with the Seattle 26 poster. If not, you can head over to the Seattle 26 website and check it out. It was designed by a fantastic local artist, and it is a whale fluke, so it's obviously reminiscent of the orcas, our wonderful Seattle orcas here, or the inspiration behind it. And then that has taken off into several different formats, and one of them turned that design into a Pride one. So the primary version, there it is. Oh, thank you. Oh, see, like little things like that. We did our pronoun pins, and those are being handed out. They're beautiful. They're metal heavy pins. She, her, they, them, he, him. I think there's a couple of others. So try to get your hands on one. They're collectible at this point. So that was then turned into a Pride version and has been used in these Pride beacons. So there are all these beautiful handmade neon lit beacons. We worked with Western Neon to create these gorgeous pieces. Most of them are maybe like 2 feet by 2 feet. Those are being handed out around the city at queer-owned businesses. And then there are a few really big ones. There's only one that has been made so far. That's the Pride one. That's literally by like 10 by 8 feet, 10 feet by 8 feet. And it's used the same design. And the whale fluke is actually mimics the top of the Seattle Stadium, or as we know it, Lumen Field's arches. It's just a really stunning design. I think it's the best. Each city, for those who might not know, each city has its own poster design. So this is all tied back to our own poster design. We turned one into a Pride, and then we created what's called selfless stations, and they're meant to be a selfie background, but each one that we have around town, it brings up a QR code to donate to an organization to benefit. And the Pride one, we selected Gender Justice League. And it actually, so that was, we were lucky enough to host this selfless station, selfless because nobody, you're doing a selfie, but it's, donating to a cause. We hosted it here for about 7 to 10 days, and now it lives at Stoop Brewing on Capitol Hill. So everybody on here, if you go to Capitol Hill, that's where its permanent home is. Swing by and get a selfie with it. It's pretty special.
Fantastic. Thanks. So our next question from the audience actually might be a nice segue between the two of you. So the question is, success of the Pride match has required a willingness to work with FIFA. Could you say more about early discussions around this, and was there resistance?
Sure. So, I mean, it's a true honor to be able to host. It's a big deal to be able to host the World Cup. Do we all agree with how FIFA runs stuff? No. And yet, at the same time, if you love the game of soccer, this is a really special moment. And I am a huge soccer fan. And I'm especially a huge soccer fan of women's soccer. And we are now waiting to find out if the US, Mexico, and Canada win a bid to bring the Women's World Cup in 2031 back to Seattle. And, Mary has had a lot to do with that. And so I think as we look at what we're doing here with the Men's World Cup, I encourage people who are thinking about this in terms of elevating the women's game to its highest place as well, to what we may be able to bring to Seattle that way. So if you are awarded, if you become a city that is awarded one of the host cities, you do have to, and that is part of what's going on. But the local organizing committee is here to organize the city and the community, and that's really the angle that the space that I stood in. I don't, in my role as just a council member on an advisory committee, I don't interact directly with FIFA. I know that there are other people on the team that do, and I'm really proud of the way in which we have navigated that, because I think it's really important to bring the biggest game in the world to this platform, to our city. We have a lot of soccer players who have worked their entire careers for this huge opportunity. And so I think that as we look at the conversations that I'm aware of, I think it's been interesting to navigate, and I think we've done so with a lot of grace. I know that's not exactly the answer that anybody wants to hear, but I'm not privileged enough to be in those direct conversations, so I don't want to speak on behalf of a conversation that's happened. But I think it's been pretty good. And realistically, Mary is one of the more incredible athletes that I know, and she worked her entire career to play at the highest level, and if that's what we've got right now, I don't want to take that away from athletes.
Well,
Do you
thanks.
want to add anything to that, Mary?
Yeah, just well, thanks, Jen. That's very kind. And
very true.
Well, my organization does work with FIFA, and and we've also worked quite a bit with FIFA around the last World Cup in Qatar, 2022. And there was also a lot of discussion around LGBTQI+ and whether or not fans would be welcome and other things. And at the time, the line was, everyone is welcome here. We are a conservative society that isn't given to public displays of affection in any manner. So we ask, the request was, while everyone's welcome, we ask that you understand that this is sort of how we are, and this is, our culture. And so what I love is, the legend has it that when asked about the Pride match for Seattle, the response from FIFA was, well, in Seattle, it is cultural that they celebrate Pride. And so we ask that you respect the local customs, which is they celebrate Pride, which is a great answer, right? That is the case. And, not only Pride, but Juneteenth as well, which is fantastic. I mean, another reason why it's so great to be a part of the landscape here. And Jen, I just can't, when they talk about human rights, there's the famous Eleanor Roosevelt quote that says, "Wherefore then do human rights begin? It's in the small places close to home." And when I think about, that, I think about what you just said about all the various different ways that you are creating safe space for the queer community and queer businesses to come alive and to be there and to be seen and heard and successful. And that brings that phrase to life more than anything I've heard in a while. So I love that. And it's a wonderful illustration of what's possible.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. I agree. I realize I'm just going to add one more thing for this crew because I think it is a more concrete example of what you're just saying. And then I'll pass it off to you for the rest of the evening. And that is that in here, our flagship location is in Ballard, the neighborhood of Ballard. I think probably most people know where that is. And it's a very Norwegian core. It's the largest Norwegian population outside of Norway. It's a big deal, but has never had a formal Pride celebration. And there are people in Seattle who've been wanting to create a repeated Pride celebration in Ballard for well over 30 years, actively been trying. And so one of the things that I think our council is exceptionally proud of is that Ballard will be hosting its first ever and intended for future repetition year after year, our very first Pride Festival and watch party. And it's a huge, all the streets in downtown core Ballard will be closed down. And for anybody who's ever heard of Seafood Fest, it's the same stage. It is truly a festival, and it's all centered around watching the Pride March. So I think, that is truly a sign of using the world's game to come together and celebrate something that's bigger than us and leaving behind an impact that is going to affect this month an entire community in a positive way, but then it will do so on a repeated basis going forward. And we have many of those stories, and that's where changing something at home makes a difference for a much broader reach, and so with that, thank you, Mary. You are an inspiration to me and to many of us, and we're really grateful to have had you give us a lot of inspiration along the way, and a lot more than just under Pride.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you so much, Jen. We really appreciate you taking your time, especially in an incredibly busy day. Please give the mayor our greetings and thanks for your time.
Well,
take care.
Thank you so much. It was an honor. I wish I could see everybody. I hope you've had a wonderful class this quarter, and best of luck with your final.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Good luck, Jen.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye. Okay, Mary, so now we get to turn to you. So you've been closely involved with both FIFA on the international level and with the United bid, which brought the cup to Canada, Mexico, and the United States. And you've been thinking about human rights generally and LGBTQIA plus rights in particular through that process. So what can you share with us about the broader context surrounding FIFA and the human rights framework that they're implementing around LGBTQ issues?
Okay, well, first of all, just a little context. So FIFA in 2016 implemented a bunch of reforms, and part of those reforms was to introduce a commitment in its constitution called the FIFA Statutes, a commitment to respect human rights. And human rights, what those mean, internationally recognized human rights in line with the UN international standards and so on and so forth. So it anchors that, and then everything else flows from there. And I'll get to the human rights host city frameworks in a second. But from that commitment, you then go to a human rights strategy for the organization, and then flows from that the next time that bidding opens for the World Cup, the Men's World Cup, and all the other World Cups, I might add, that then they introduce human rights requirements. So that happened and so I'm at the bid for 2026 and those land on my desk, right? And so there are, 4 or 5 pages, single space, very small type of requirements around human rights that then, after the bid was awarded to the United Bid, Canada, Mexico, and the United States, that then there is an entity that starts up called a FIFA 2026 entity. It's based in Miami. And they took the bid book and they took the human rights strategy and developed from that, okay, how do you now implement this strategy across the event? And so that's where then the framework comes in. And the framework has its advantages and its shortcomings. If you're civil society, first of all, I will say that the framework was developed in consultation between FIFA 2026 and civil society. So that's, different groups, from those who represent workers to those who represent the LGBT community to Black and brown populations, unhoused populations, privacy rights experts, everyone, right, was involved in sort of what that framework had to have in it. But at the end of the day, they're guidelines and not sort of, fiat, I would say. And I'd say there are probably a lot of lawyers who got involved in that decision because, can you require something that is either legally or not legally, something that you have to do, difficult. And then there's obviously the political context that we're all in. So it's a guidance document, but nonetheless, it's an important document because for the first time, it takes these human rights requirements, right, at the continental level, right, for the bid, and it develops a framework for host cities to then look at it and say, okay, so now how do we implement these human rights requirements? And that's what the framework does, is it tries to do that. And then, from that, and we can get into this in a minute, Ron, is how you then look at that framework and say, okay, how does that framework bring to life protections for the LGBTQI plus community? Which is maybe where you want to go next.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I wonder, could you start to unpack for us, maybe using one of the points in the framework, how you would apply that specifically to LGBTQ rights?
Sure, that's sure. So first of all, the framework, it's available online on the FIFA website. The framework has 3 main sort of sections. One is on what's called inclusion and safeguarding, and that's the one I'm going to unpack. Then there's workers' rights. And then finally, there's access to remedy. So how do you, if there's been harm that's caused, how do you then make it right? Do you have access to ways to make it right? That's remedy. So those are the 3 main areas. As I'm sure you can imagine, LGBTQI plus rights are sort of in all of those, right? But I'm just going to unpack one, to your point, and that is inclusion and safeguarding. So inclusion and safeguarding has basically 5 or 6 different pieces to it. So the first is inclusion and non-discrimination. So the framework talks about there's expected that they're going to prohibit and address any discriminatory conduct. They're going to involve vulnerable populations in the planning of initiatives. So that's called stakeholder engagement in the human rights world. And then can they use the event to showcase the diversity of people and lived experience? And what a perfect example than Pride, right? I mean, what you just heard Jen talk about was how they are using the World Cup and the match to really have an occasion to showcase this wonderful diversity of the LGBT and the queer community. So I will say that if you go to the framework and you do like a search for the term LGBTQI plus, you're not going to find it, but that's because none of the different areas of discrimination are unpacked and enumerated. Right? There are lots of different criteria, but it is basically included inside of it. So it's very clear. Then you get into, that's inclusion, non-discrimination. Then you get into safeguarding. So prioritizing the welfare of populations that are at heightened risk. Well, that includes the LGBTQI plus community, and particularly youth, particularly trans kids, right? So that safeguarding part also has a theme in it where you want to pull out vulnerabilities due to being part of the queer community. The next piece is public safety. All right. So, and this was touched on before about policing around Pride events and things like this. So what the framework asks is that protocols for how security is done, public safety, involves consultation with populations that are at heightened risk, right? So you're involving members of the queer community in discussions around how they're going to develop policing protocols for Pride. Now, in our city, because we have Pride every year, this isn't new. But what is new is having hundreds of thousands of people in town because they get to enjoy the World Cup. I'll just do a couple of last couple of ones. The most significant one probably is freedom of assembly, opinion, expression, and the press, right? So freedom of expression, that's Pride, right? Yep. That is right. And that's a lovely thing about it, but it's about that being protected, right? And then there's some other things that are included in there, but that's just an example of how you can unpack the framework and look at how it comes to life when you're talking about the LGBTQI plus population.
That's super helpful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I wonder if now would be a good time to show the video from your organization that sort of talks about some of the processes you have. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Can I tee it up first?
Sure.
So at this World Cup, one of the things that hasn't been done before is to put together there's wonderful guidelines around small businesses, as Jen's mentioned. The Seattle Organizing Committee has put together this wonderful app that then highlights different parts of Washington State and businesses and things like that, which is fantastic. What we did at the Center for Sport and Human Rights is put together a resource bank, if you will, of resources if you need help. So this is about when things aren't going great, and there are a variety of different areas, which you'll see in the video, but we launched it last week, and it's called the Fan and Communities Guide, and it essentially provides in 12 languages, all 16 host cities are involved, and it's website based, but you can use it on your mobile phone. It's designed for that. And you can search any one of the risk areas that we bring up. And again, they'll be in the video. You can then search on that and then filter where you can go for help in any of those issues in any host city that you're in. So with that tees it up, and now you can roll it.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think it's such a good example of the sort of affordances that creating something like the framework create, right? So the framework itself isn't going to do the work, but it opens up the conversation. It opens up the possibilities for organizations like you and other civil society organizations to actually start to unpack some of the issues and make other real-time interventions possible.
Well, actually oh, sorry. Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah, please.
One of the things that we've seen, and now this gets into the context that we're all in, right? It's an interesting political context, particularly in the United States. What we're seeing is that while perhaps municipalities, perhaps some host cities have less appetite to be leading or out front on some what are by some considered progressive issues. What you are seeing is civil society step in and occupy that space, which is wonderful, right? So it's being done, but civil society groups, fan supporters groups, a coalition called Dignity 2026, they are trying to occupy that space to then provide resources for fans. And the center is part of civil society, and we actually worked with most of the host cities to help develop this guide. And for them, I mean, there are great people who are working on this event, and they want people to be safe, and they want people to be protective, and they don't want the politics to get in the way of it. So whether or not they felt comfortable signposting a lot of these is one thing, but what they did universally appreciate is the fact that somebody was willing, or that some organization was willing to create this warehouse of resources that then everybody could access.
Makes total sense and super helpful. So I'm going to invite folks to start posting questions in Slido. Some folks already have, and one of them anticipated my follow-up question for you, Mary, which was specifically the sort of how are you thinking about the next steps for taking lessons from Seattle's hosting and all the other host cities in this World Cup to next year's Women's World Cup, to Spain, Morocco, Portugal in 30, and then particularly thinking ahead to the possibility of the United States being one of the co-hosts, and even Seattle possibly being a host city again for the 31 Women's World Cup, and then on to Saudi Arabia in 34. How are you thinking about that sort of future life? Where do we go from here, and what are the lessons we've learned?
Well, that's a great question. So there's many things about this World Cup where there's a lot of learning because it's never been done before. So, and we can just enumerate some of these first. So first of all, there's never been a 48-team World Cup. There's never been a World Cup hosted by a continent, basically. Not one country. 2 countries has been done, not 3, but a continent essentially. So that has its own, right, complexities with border crossings and things like this. But then in addition to that, you have this human rights requirement. I mean, that's a big change from what was previously done with previous World Cups. That was a big change. And then you also have a new hosting model. So FIFA also changed its model for how it hosts events. I'm old enough to remember World Cup 94. None of you probably in your audience do, but I do. And back then it was a model like the Olympics uses, which is you have an autonomous local organizing committee that sort of plans it, and then they do all the work to bring it to life. FIFA with this tournament is implementing a new model, which is, if you can imagine, on June 13, 2018, which was the day that the United Bid was awarded this tournament, right? The bid book is the promise of this is how we want to host the event. So basically what we did is we were awarded the event based on that bid book. And then it's almost like metaphorically, after the decision was made, we handed the bid book back to FIFA and said, please implement this. Because the new hosting strategy has FIFA setting up a FIFA controlled entity that then implements, instead of a local organizing committee, you have this FIFA entity, and it works with these independent host city committees, of which there's 16, right? So this is also a brand new model for doing this, and there's a lot of learnings there too. So there's lots, and my organization, the Center for Sport and Human Rights, is all over what are we learning about what's working, what's not working. You know, what are the gaps that we need to fill? What are gaps in the model? Or the model works, but this particular aspect of it doesn't. And one of the things that we're learning when it comes to human rights, since we're talking about it, is this concept of responsibility. So, and if I can just go down that rabbit hole for a second, Ron.
Please.
So in human rights work, there's something called the UN Guiding Principles for Business and Human Rights. And what that does is it outlines, if you're a business or, commercial enterprise or an enterprise that has commercial interests, that it outlines what your responsibility is. And so if you look at, and FIFA has made a commitment to the UN Guiding Principles. So now it's trying to implement human rights throughout the World Cup. And one of the key learnings is that you have FIFA, the event owner, then you have FIFA, the event controller, right, implementing it. And then you have the host cities, which actually isn't just one thing. It's a host city organizing committee, which is a nonprofit. And then you have the host city government, which is the municipality that does the police and and all of them have actually different responsibilities when it comes to human rights. But what we're seeing is sort of everyone sort of standing around pointing fingers at, I thought you were going to do that. No, I thought you were going to do that. And meanwhile, these issues kind of fall on the floor and everyone's standing around looking at them saying, yeah, that's a problem. But there isn't real accountability for, who's going to deal with issues that, that need to be handled. And so that's one of the key learnings right out of the gate that we're learning for future events that will also have this hosting model is how do you fix that and make that clearer?
I think that relates really closely to another question that's in the list here, which is sort of thinking about what I would connect LGBTQ rights and ICE's presence. So one of the groups you didn't mention there was also the federal government is also another entity that it's involved. And in the current political climate, how do local police, local organizing committees, FIFA interact with the federal government in thinking about questions like LGBTQ rights, ICE presence at the stadiums, those kinds of things?
Well, and we're seeing some fascinating things happen, right? I mean, fascinating is, kind of an anodyne word. I mean, it's disturbing, but you're seeing executive orders come through at the federal level, and host city committees, for example, are, when they point to a city and say, "What are you doing about ICE or immigration or what have you?" And these are not things that municipally they're doing, that's been originated by municipalities. This is entirely being driven by the federal government through executive orders that are doing this. And so the cities are now saying, okay, how do we cope? And again, the city is not just, it's the local organizing committee and it's the city government. So you have some city governments that are actually looking to inoculate things by saying, well, ICE can't use city property to stage, or ICE is forbidden from covering their face, or they're trying to implement a variety of different measures to mitigate the impact of enforcement of these executive orders, which is what's causing so much concern, not only among the populace of who live here, but also everyone who's looking to come into the country to enjoy the World Cup.
Yeah. So along those lines, how do you think about the future of rights, both, I mean, you've spoken a little bit about how you imagine the lessons of this cup being to sort of think about where does authority lie, where does accountability lie, how do we sort of make sure things aren't dropping through the cracks. I'm also curious to know, and you and I have talked about this a little bit, just one-on-one, how do you think about the future of transgender rights around FIFA, around the World Cups, especially transgender athletes, but also transgender spectators, that sort of thing?
Well, protections for transgender, everyone who is transgender are are under attack, right? So, and these are again via executive orders, that affect. I mean, for example, the executive orders around trans inclusion or prohibiting it affected every single sport governing body in this country. They have no choice. They have to, or they're breaking the law essentially. So, I mean, that puts them in an impossible situation, right? Not to mention, if you're trying to stage an event. So, I mean, the eroding of rights it's like almost erasing a whole population of people. It's trying to erase their existence, which is horrifying. So it's real. And we also see that, that women's sports are being used as a cudgel to exclude. So, you may or may not have seen, government guarantees for the Women's World Cup for 2031 not being provided because they want to have a discussion on, whether or not FIFA would reconsider its gender eligibility policy. I mean, so those sorts of, that's a big deal. And hopefully, that doesn't advance, but that's extremely concerning, right?
Yeah, and those are the conversations that are being had on lots of different levels that I think we need to engage with in a ton of different ways to make sure they don't move forward in ways that end up harming people, which obviously seems like a very real possibility given what's happened in other sports federations and sporting bodies.
I would say the other thing that that is important when it looks at sort of 2031 is one of the things that we're also looking at is learning from what happened during the 2026, both the preparation and then at games time, which is upon us. What did we learn? But then filtering that through the lens of, okay, now it's 2027, you're in Brazil, and you have an audience that looks a little bit different. It's 2031, you're in the US, Mexico, Costa Rica, Jamaica, inshallah, hopefully. And your fan base is going to look like Y, right? It's going to look different. And there's going to be way more families, way more children, way more women, and an out LGBT population, both on the field and in the stands. And so how do you take what you're learning about 2026 and the learnings, some of which I mentioned about the human rights framework and responsibility, and look at it then through the lens of those events that have different populations and a different fan base? And then you also look at different contexts. So Brazil is going to be very different. They're going to have a presidential election right after the tournament. So that'll be a big deal there. But then 2030, three very different countries. Portugal, Spain, and Morocco, very different. And then, of course, Saudi Arabia, very, very different again. So there's going to be a lot of learning, and it is going to iterate over time, right? Every time you do one of these events, it's a combination of process and context.
Mm-hmm. And to your earlier point, I think it also calls the question of sort of what do we even mean by culture when we say this is a culture of a place? How do we? It tends to be framed as if that's a sort of static thing as opposed to something that's always being sort of challenged and contested, whether you're talking about the United States or Morocco or Canada or wherever it is.
Well, there's also culture and rule of law, right? Yeah. Which is also rule of law, particularly internationally, is also also being eroded. Yeah. Yeah. In terms of that. So, but this is where the human rights part comes in, right? The human rights requirements of FIFA actually say, okay, there's international human rights standards, right? And they're actually enumerated, and they're known, and they're knowable, and they're not kind of open to interpretation. They are what they are. And then you have in any country around the world, from Scandinavia to, other parts of the world, there's going to be local laws and practice. And there's going to be a gap between sort of the international standards for human rights and international laws and practice. And that gap is the human rights part of the event strategy, where you say, okay, how are you going to bridge that gap? So in some cases, it's legal to do certain things. The kafala system in Qatar, which is very, around labor rights, was legal. It was legal to do, now working conditions or something else, but it was legal to have the kafala system in Qatar and many other parts of the Middle East. That doesn't mean it's in line with international standards. And so that was the issue, right? And so they actually changed the law and dismantled the kafala system, which was a pretty big deal. Mm-hmm. And an example of what a World Cup can bring about in terms of change. But just because it's legal doesn't mean it's okay. So that's the other part of the culture. There's the cultural part, and then there's the legal part.
Thank you so much, Mary. You're a legend of the game, and you're even more a legend of the game of human rights in sport. We're so honored to have had you here tonight to help us think through questions of LGBTQ rights and sort of looking ahead. So thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it.
You bet. And I tried to find the jacket that was the closest to glitter that I had.
I love it.
It's Pride Month.
Yeah.
And if you're ever in White Center, if you see the house that has all the Pride lights around it, that'd be my house.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Well,
Right.
thank you again so much. And to all of you in the audience, let me thank you again as we close our final session for being a part of this journey over the past 2.5 months. There was a question in the Q&A that was asking if the Global Sport Lab will do work on other kinds of sporting events. And the answer is an absolute yes. We're interested in all kinds of sports, from the grassroots through the professional level. Any sport you can think of, we're curious about and interested in how people make meaning out of their world through that sport. So do please stay in touch with us. You can go to our website and join our listserv, and enjoy the start of the World Cup. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for this great journey, and take care. All the best.